Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you guys are having a great day. I would just like to talk briefly about one game, which is the Diofield Chronicle. This is a tactical or real-time tactics RPG game that was released by Square Enix in 2022. And it was a game at release that I really wanted to play because I played the demo, but I held off on it because of what a lot of other users have said, and I'm going to echo a lot of those sentiments. That the summation of this little analysis is that the game doesn't feel like a $60 game, but it does feel very much like a $20 or $30 game. So if you're a fan of real-time tactics games or RTS games, if you're a fan of games like Dragon Age Origins or even Neverwinter Nights, or if you're a fan of tactical RPGs, this might be a really good game to buy if you can get it on the Steam sale. It just doesn't feel like a $60 AAA game. And there's a couple reasons for that. So the first one is the presentation of the game. The graphics are sharp and high fidelity, but the aesthetics are definitely lacking. If you're looking at some of the gameplay footage, look at some of the cutscenes, and you can see that there's a little bit of a non-congruence of styles when you look at the characters and the environments. On the one hand, everything is highly detailed, high fidelity, high quality textures. On the other hand, the characters are drawn like anime characters, where something like a cell shading approach would be much more appropriate. That being said, the game has most of the graphical bells and whistles you'd expect from a new game. It even has ray tracing. The environments look pretty good, if a little bit sparsely furnished. The battle maps look okay. They look like little miniature table games. They remind me of wargaming, like with miniatures. So I kind of like the aesthetic, but all of it feels a little bit underdrawn, especially for the amount of fidelity that the game presents, at least on the PC. The music I really liked, but I feel like there's not enough of it. I hear the same few tracks over and over again, and I just don't hear enough variety, and the songs that I do hear are just not so good that I want to hear them over and over again. There's also the problem of the animations for the characters, especially the facial animations look very flat, wax-like. There's not a lot of expression going on there. The movements, we see some of the same programmed movements over and over again. Everything looks a little bit stiff. And within the character designs themselves, there's such a strong contrast between how good the characters look in their stylized watercolored character portraits and how bad they end up looking in the 3D rendered environments. It's kind of off-putting. Now, graphics are certainly not everything in a game, but I am evaluating this according to AAA standards. This is a game published by Square Enix after all, and they usually produce some really good-looking characters. This one just doesn't meet that standard. Now, moving past the production, I would say the gameplay overall is pretty good. I can say that this is a very enjoyable game to play, especially on the micro level. That is, when you're actually doing the battles. Those battles are pretty fun, and this is the case on the harder difficulty modes, as well as the easier difficulty modes, depending on how much you want to manage the systems of the game in order to overcome the challenges of the battles. The combat is very reminiscent of games like Dragon Age Origins or Final Fantasy XII or any of the old BioWare RPGs. So if you're into that kind of tactics-based gameplay where you can pause the action and queue up some special spells, then this might be a really fun game to play. And in general, I did enjoy the gameplay. Where I think the micro falls a little bit short is the lack of terrain. That is, everything is flat. There's no elevation that you get in more tactical RPGs like Final Fantasy Tactics or Fire Emblem or something like that. You're generally much more limited to the vertical space that you can use for your advantage in the game. What I do like, though, is that because it has an RTS feel, things feel a little bit more tense. There's a lot more that you have to be paying attention to as the combat plays out, a lot like games like Final Fantasy XII or Dragon Age Origins. Where I think the gameplay actually comes up a bit short is at the micro and meta level. This is where you are developing your character's skills, you are working through various talent trees, you're unlocking new weapons that you can make, buying new weapons from the store, or getting them through some other story means, or upgrading your big spells like Bahamut. These things feel really linear, very straightforward, not a lot of choice there, not a lot of attention that you have to pay to the whole process. You just get as many talent points as you want and try to spend them in what way seems best to you. Compare this to something like either Fire Emblem or maybe Final Fantasy Tactics, where managing the skills that your characters acquire is an important part of progressing them through various classes to make them as powerful as they can be. All of your characters come in one class, and you can do a little bit with their options within that one class depending on how you equip them and what spells you unlock, but it's pretty limited. Now to talk a little bit about the story. Remember that there are three important parts to every story. That is the setting, the characters, and the plot. Where this game, I think, fails is in the characters department. And that's unfortunate because characters really sell a story. One of the reasons that Fire Emblem games are so popular is because of the characters and the way that those characters get managed in almost a visual novel-like style. You don't really get any of that with this game. I noticed a lot of reviewers were comparing this game to Fire Emblem because I think that's the closest game in recent memory that has a lot of feel that's similar to this game. You notice I'm comparing it more to Final Fantasy XII and to Dragon Age Origins. Those older games are, I think, much more in the vein of what this game is about. And those older games didn't have this kind of emphasis on characters that Fire Emblem has. But still, though, there's really no way to explore your characters in your party at all in this game. You just kind of go through the narrative plot of the story, and the characters reveal their personalities through those story points, like in, I guess, a standard JRPG. Both Fire Emblem and Dragon Age Origins, and all the Dragon Age games, have options for you to interact with the characters directly, to get to know them, to care about their struggles, maybe unlock quests for them. That sort of stuff really lets you get attached to what the story is about and what it means. In the Diofield Chronicle, you as the player are really just along for the ride. And the characters themselves, from what they reveal to you, are not particularly likable, and they're not very well defined. One of the things you'll notice with Fire Emblem, just as an example, I don't think it's the best comparison in terms of gameplay, but when we're talking about experiencing characters in a game, I think it's a really good example, because every character, besides being able to interact with them and get to know them, they have a very specific personality, and that personality is defined in some extreme ways. They may be a character that hides in their bedroom. It might be a character that's extremely outgoing, very flirtatious. It might be a character that is always pursuing the end over the means. It might be a character that's somewhat evil, a character who curses other characters. So those really almost caricature-like portrayals of the characters makes them more memorable, and it makes you care about the outcomes for them, and it makes you want to get to know them. And it also makes you care about what they're actually doing in the story versus only seeing them in the cutscenes. If you were to go play a game like any of the Fire Emblem games, Fire Emblem Awakening, for example, and you only saw the characters through the cutscenes, you didn't do any of the support conversations, you really wouldn't have any kind of affection for any of them, and you really wouldn't know what they're doing in the cutscenes either, like how their personality is expressing themselves in the cutscenes. So some of the favorite characters would just be mostly absent from any kind of thought about what the story of Fire Emblem Awakening is actually about. Now, do you have to do those kinds of character interactions? No. If you play a game like Final Fantasy Tactics, there's just enough dialogue going on between enough characters that you really understand who the various characters playing through the story actually are. Make no mistake, the big flaw in Diofield Chronicle as far as the story goes is the lack of defined characters and likable characters. And that's really unfortunate because I think there's a pretty good plot in here. It's fairly complex, and there's a really complex setting that that plot gets to exist in, but we don't really care about the outcome of the plot because we don't care who's involved in the plot. Likewise, it seems like most of the cutscenes run through the paces of a plot a little more quickly than is comfortable because there's virtually no characterization that happens in between these big plot points. So after you do a larger battle, there's something big that happens with the plot, and they explain something that happens, some political maneuver, this lord or that lord, or these bandits, this empire or this group that's resisting the Empire. They tell you what happens. They don't show you what happens. And you don't really know who's involved in that or why you should care for your little group, the Blue Foxes, I think, this mercenary group that you are running, and why those things really matter for the outcomes of the group until much later in the game. One last thing I just found a little bit off-putting with the story is it's yet another JRPG, yet another tactical JRPG that has this story about a corrupt church that's secretly doing devilish evil things. I've seen this in so many tactics games by now that it's just old hat. It doesn't really have any impact. I think the first time I saw it was maybe Final Fantasy Tactics, and it's been in so many of these games by now that I'm just bored with it. I would love to see somebody do another political kind of game that doesn't involve some sort of corrupt evil church running things, secretly run by devils. I mean, come on, we can think of new things besides this stand-in for the Catholic Church is actually secretly evil. So anyway, that's the Diofield Chronicle. It occupies a weird space for me. I wouldn't call it a AAA game, even though it's published by a AAA gaming firm. I might call it like a B-level game. It definitely feels more than an indie game as far as the presentation goes and everything that's in it, the polish that exists, but it doesn't quite meet that AAA standard. I think I paid $30 for it, and I think it's worth $30. And as one last point, if you check out the Steam page for this, you will see that they say that they're adding some kind of extra content, hopefully for free, in 2023. I'll maybe make a follow-up if that turns out to be something that drastically enhances the game, if it engoodens what is actually a really strong base for a game. That's what you get with Diofield Chronicle. It's a really firm foundation, but the gameplay just doesn't develop enough as you play through the game, and the story doesn't really grip you because the characters aren't particularly likable. Last thing I'll say is that it plays great on the Steam Deck, and the cloud save features between my PC and the Steam Deck work really, really well, and I enjoyed playing it on my Steam Deck while I hung out with my daughter, who wouldn't sleep a couple of different nights. So I had a great time with it for the price, and you probably would, but it just doesn't feel like $60. That's what I feel like at the end of the day. So leave me your thoughts down below about the Diofield Chronicle and whether it's a game that interested you or not. And I'll see you guys next time. Newest book is called Afterglow, Generation Y, collection of short stories. And make sure you're on my mailing list, dvspress.com/list. I think you get a free book, and I will keep you appraised of all the new publications for the year 2023, year of our Lord, 2023. Have a great one, and I'll see you guys next time.